Hello and welcome to Dice Punks, a tabletop role-playing podcast where we focus on playing full campaigns in less well-known systems. This week in episode 48, our Nobilis are honored guests of an erratic elder aristocrat. Hello and welcome. I'm Adam, your friendly neighborhood game master, and joining me are...
Hi, I'm Drew, and I'll be playing Leorian Cathar, Viscount of Tempo, and I'm back in this manner in a manner I didn't expect.
Hi, I'm Robin, and I'll be playing Lyssa Crate, the resolute and raunchy Furious Queen.
I'm Des, and I am Romnet. And I'd really like to get to the bottom, and by that I mean ending these murders that constitute this darkness in the manor.
Well, excellent. Thank you, guys. And let's see. We need to get our Mortal XP roll from Romnet. You want to go ahead and do that?
That is a pair of sixes.
Pair of sixes.
Describe for me my XP today.
Well, let's see. With a pair of sixes, it is a disappointingly cold and inert iron experience point. Any particular stat growth or XP expenditure on anyone's behalf here?
I think not on my side. I think we're probably coming up on final stat growth soonish, but yeah, for the moment, nothing for me.
All right.
Same on my end.
I think it would cost 3 to up oratory.
If oratory is currently at 2,
yes,
it would cost 3.
Then I will do that.
All right. Yeah, so for 3 mortal experience, you may promote oratory from 2 dice to 3, giving you a pool of 4 in that skill. Excellent.
You'll be entertained to know that when I was entering the notes of how I'd spent the XP, I initially typed it as Oragory.
I suppose it could get gory. I believe, though, that brings us to our recap of last session, this time courtesy of Leorian. Take it away. Indeed. When you're ready.
Well, following the incident with the canal doppelgangers, we realized that Feywa had arrived in Fermata. When we found her, however, she was wounded, seriously so. Would have been dead had she not been divine. Ilona couldn't do much, and indeed, Feywa herself insisted that the only thing to do was to absorb her power. Sirtha, it seems, had stabbed her in the very soul. Her essence would reconvene around Puff, she said, unbeknownst to her assailant. This needn't be goodbye, at least not on an eternal scale. We managed to nettle her murderer, if only to prove a point, and it being what she wanted, we took what we could. We checked in with Tohil and parted ways with Apatia, who felt the need to return to her homeland to rally the people of Diamakor to our cause. We do, I suppose, have a cause, even as our friends scatter. But before that, we laid Feywa to rest as best we could, where Lurenton once stood, with Lyssa saying the rites. And just then, Timos Calivan made contact. The estate, it seemed, had gone strange. Too quickly, I pledged to help. Lyssa and Romnet, being smarter than I am, sensed a trap. But we saw no way forward but to spring it. And so after a brief audience with Dosk, we headed to Calivan, and into the Dome of Darkness, which disconcertingly extended beyond the estate. We were able to give Timos little comfort and small hope, but that, I think, was still a marked improvement for him. And so, in short order, we found ourselves before the Lord of the Manor himself, and he greeted us as dignitaries of a sort, and he said, "Come and celebrate with us the foundation of a godhead in Calivan." From here, I imagine things can only go well.
Yeah, so to set the scene just a little bit as we resume here, you have entered into the sort of banquet hall of the Calivan Manor in Calivan. And you are in this grand but mostly darkened space. There is music coming from somewhere off in the darkness. The only spot that's really lit rather than limned in silver is around the table itself, where there is I call it a sparse crowd for the size of the table, eating and drinking, feasting and murmuring. Up at the head of the table is Tyrios, standing and raising his goblet to you in toast or salute or welcome. Behind you are the richly furnished doors, which have swung shut, but without any particular sense that you are trapped, just that they are closed. Much as Drew just let us know, Tyrios's words are sort of like, the echoes of them are still dying away. He had welcomed you, and I will reiterate, as much so I can find Tyrios's voice again as anything else. Welcome, welcome. It is good to see you all, you dignitaries, so to speak. Come and sit, celebrate with us the foundation of a godhead in Calivan. And seems to be sort of waiting for you to take his invitation, arm outstretched and goblet raised.
What does he look like with the sight?
Very good question. Definitely some divinity there. But I guess if I had to use one word to describe how he looks with the sight, it would be confusing. It's the best out of character analogy I can think of is when you like do color printing on like a mass market scale, you use color registry, right? The shapes get put on one color at a time, and that makes the colors, but sometimes the color registry can be kind of off, and you'll see like the overlapping shapes with the colors kind of bleeding outside the lines and not quite correct. His divine essence kind of looks like there's maybe some discord or competition informing its visible display. It is, however, considerable for all of that.
Let the listener know that Robin and I were both trying to figure out who was speaking first.
With awkward, intense eye contact for half a second.
That's the main thing you miss, dear listener, is awkward, intense eye contact.
It's a thing. It happens.
It is. It happens. My lord, thank you for the invitation. It's been some time. May I introduce my fellow dignitaries? And I gesture at the both of you, and
charm plus grace is 3 dice.
Yeah. Pair of 7s.
Tyrios, sort of focuses on you and moves his goblet like out of the way as though it was blocking his view before, and says, "Why, that's the guitar boy. Ah, come sit." Or he waves a hand and the music stops from wherever it's coming from. He says, "Play us something. Introduce your friends. We must celebrate."
It hadn't occurred to me until that moment that he might not remember me, and I am both relieved and terrified to see that he does. And I say that my friends here, being as auspicious as they are, may need to introduce themselves. If I may provide some underscoring, I get out my lute and, of course, gesture as though to remind my companions, as though they need to be reminded that it can become a weapon at a moment's notice. For the moment, however, it is not. I strum the sort of gentle, courtly refrain that one would expect as dignitaries are introduced.
And go ahead and roll me a perform music, 7 plus an expert die.
Okay. We'll set that expert to 6 because we live in hope. And that actually comes out to... Oh, wow. That didn't roll awesome, so that's 2 6s.
Oh. So close.
Continuing the theme for the day, apparently.
Yeah, right.
So yes, you start to underscore the introductions and look to your companions. Listeners, there is pointing going on to determine who shall speak first.
Not actual nose goes, but in spirit, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Rumnet. Former prophet. Murder.
Let's get from you your charm plus fascinate in place of charm plus graces. It's gonna be 4 plus a
indeed.
master die.
So 4 dice. That's 3 6s. So with the master die, it's 4 6s. Unfortunately, we have overshot.
If would that we could average.
Yeah. It would be really weird to use gobble dice against each other for this, which is a mechanic we haven't engaged much with in Rain. In any case,
it would also be self-defeating to decide to set the master die to something other than 6, given that.
Right, sure. So yes, you give a thoroughly charming introduction.
It does become 7s, though.
Oh, right. Yes, exactly. Because you are a
ornamentally
beautiful
pretty
lad. Yes. In this case, a somewhat macabre ornament, given the eyes and hair. But I've got some macabre ornaments around my house, and you know what?
I mean,
they can also be pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Edgar had some points.
In any case, Tyrios responds with a sort of single, guffaw. You are a singular personage at that, and I would love to hear about this prophecy. And then he tracks his gaze over to Lissa.
I am Fury, or Lissa. And where or who is this godhead you speak of?
Give me a charm plus graces, 5 dice.
No matches.
Let's say getting right to the point, given the no matches, there's no discordant note in what I'm playing, but it gets a little more intense for a moment if you're listening carefully.
Tyrios is, sort of keeping the genial smile he's been using as you speak. When you hit the word fury, he squeezes his eyes shut and balls his hands into fists, crushing the goblet in one hand and spilling wine. And then in about a second and a half, as you sort of are catching up and finishing what you had to say and trying to figure out, he immediately regains his composure and simply drops the goblet onto the table as though nothing had happened, and answers your question by sort of gesturing down his body. He says, "It is I am reborn anew."
And how did this come to be?
Well, I'd be happy to tell you about it, but come, sit. This is a conversation for dinner, not for shouting across the room like strangers. And he gestures you up to the dais where he's sitting at the head of the table, and basically just shoos some of the people who are sitting to his left and right to spots further down to free up space for you.
Does anyone else in the room and or do the shadows look like anything in the sight?
No other person in the room has any sort of divine nature, nor do they change their guise or appearance in the sight. The darkness is clearly not natural, but it has not got the signature of a miracle on it either. Given that this is a chancel, it seems to be part of the nature of the place.
Okay.
So you've been invited to sit.
Does anyone move to sit?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. everybody moves up to the head of the table. Who is going to? Two people are going to have to sit next to Tyrios. Who is going to be the odd one out? Who is sitting with one of their allies between them and Tyrios?
I'm pointing.
I would be
more
the
pointing.
I would be the odd one out. I would probably be the last to move up.
I was going to say, I plunk myself next to Tyrius, continuing to loot somewhat awkwardly while in the chair, tilting it up and putting it in my lap.
Mm-hmm. That
I will take his other side.
Yeah, Ramet will be on his other side. And not that I expect it to matter, but for the completeness of the picture, Alyssa, which of your allies do you sit beside?
Why would you do this? I'm gonna roll.
In case it matters.
I sit next to Leorian.
Okay.
If it was gonna be lower numbers Leorian, higher numbers Ramnut was how I did that, and I got a 3.
Tyrios looks pleased as you all come and take a seat, and he gestures at the thoroughly, at this point, chaotic spread of food and drinks and glasses and utensils and sides and all sorts of things on the table. He says, "Please help yourself. There's no end to my largesse at current." And then takes a different goblet, probably not originally his from what you can tell, off the table, and takes a swig of it and puts it back down, and turns to Lyssa on the other side of Leorian and says, "As to your question, I suppose you could say it was an inheritance, long-delayed patrimony, perhaps. Came upon me of a sudden. We've been celebrating ever since I figured out what had happened."
From whom?
Oh, that's the question, isn't it? I must assume, he gestures at the darkened room around, that it's from the Obsidian God. But it didn't exactly come with a note attached, and he chuckles at his own joke. Leorian, this is very out of character for Tyrios. You have never heard him this informal or loquacious, and you're not sure you've ever heard him laugh. Now, you haven't spent days and days around him, but from what you have been privy to, this is very different.
I am going to... I haven't done this in a while. I'm going to make myself glorious. And try... I guess this would be both making myself glorious and doing a ghost miracle, and just make the general aura around me furious. I'm also going to say that Tyrius know the truth, I suppose. Gosh, my brain just died in the middle of that train of thought.
It's all good.
I'm going to say, I regret to inform you that the Obsidian God is dead.
There's a beat. You assume your mantle of glory and you ghost miracle up some fury around you. It doesn't have very much in the way of tangible effect because everybody right near you is protected by an autoritas of their own, but is certainly noticeable to those who can sense these things. And he sort of regards you for a moment and then grins widely and sort of barks a laugh. "Ha! I suppose that would explain a lot then. It would appear that I am the Obsidian God's successor then."
Not likely, considering the nature of the Obsidian God's demise by another god. I would suspect and be concerned instead that you're being used.
He knits his brow a little bit. "I hardly see how that could be the case, but, well, I suppose we'll have to get to the bottom of it one way or another. And as he sort of, winds down, as his chuckle dies away, he too assumes a mantle of glory. This is, as is often the case with miracles of the spirit, not a change in his appearance so much as change in how it registers. Where, Lissa, your aspect of glory tends to be an intimidating and sort of, in the original sense of the word, awesome aura. Tyrios's is convivial. He looks avuncular, but also authoritative as he sort of smiles in your direction.
Keeping my proverbial third eye clear of Tyrios, I'm going to cast my sight around to see if I can find the source of the darkness.
It appears to exist here as a property of this place. It's dark like Fermata was dark when Fermata was a chancel.
Well, it seems you have at least some of your grand predecessors' domains: darkness, madness, revelry. I wait to see if he reacts to either the word some or grand predecessor.
He doesn't seem to. He regards you with a sort of steadily friendly smile and attentive gaze well into the pause after you speak.
Then I will let the pause become a conclusion. From that conclusion, he can draw whatsoever he wishes, obviously.
Mm-hmm. He regards you for another few long seconds, but assuming that nobody breaks the silence here in particular, Leorian, are you still playing currently?
Yeah. Definitely never stopped playing. And in fact, I make an attempt at some point to... whatever was being played when we walked in, I mimic that as best I can, and again scan his face for any reaction.
Sure. Nothing particularly immediate, but as this silence drags on, he suddenly sort of whirls in your direction and slams an open palm onto the table, and says, just short of a shout, very forcefully, "Cut that out!"
Cut, music? That particular music? What precisely?
He just gestures sharply in your direction and says, "Oh, you're a guest. You should not have to provide the entertainment. But please put the loot away." And sort of gives you that same sort of friendly smile as though nothing had happened.
That's a pity. I was enjoying the music.
He sort of nods agreeably and says, "Oh, yes, well, our friend here is a consummate musician, but certainly a dinner guest shouldn't need to play for a supper, and certainly not at the table."
Consummate, and yet I should cease. I've received mixed reviews before, including from your lordship, so...
Well, he sort of cocks his head as though trying to think of something, and then shakes it a little bit and says, "Speaking of, where has Timos been? He's being most rude."
"Rude, you say?"
"He has absented himself from the festivities."
"I think perhaps he may be, if I may, concerned."
"Oh?"
"Well,
He is the reason for our presence, so it seems to have done you some service.
Yes, no, he's a good lad in his own way. I haven't seen him in a moment. And you haven't even touched the feast. Eat, drink, be merry. And he follows his own advice and begins sort of picking at his platters in front of him as though on assignment to do so.
How does the food look in the sight?
You beat me to it, yeah.
It seems perfectly mundane. If any harm would come to you, it would just be if somebody didn't cook the chicken all the way through.
I will ping for a minor divination of murder. That is to say, is there any murder or murderous intent nearby?
Waiter, is there murder in this chicken?
Thank you, Drew.
That's what I was also thinking for half a second.
As you sort of scan the food and drink in front of you, the only thing that comes back in the least bit unusual is that the meat on the table was not killed. It was created as meat. These animals were never alive.
Burger.
A miraculous burger.
Sponsored by Impossible Burger or any other.
Well, and to be clear, these are made of meat. They just weren't ever alive. The Impossible Burger
they're more
not.
Impossible than Impossible Burgers. Impossible Burger is actually perfectly possible. You're taking a lot of peas, and anyway.
The actually Impossible Burger, if you will.
Indeed.
I'm going to do a lesser creation of fury on the food that Tyrius is eating, with the idea of making it rebel, just so that when he tries to pick up a forkful, it rolls off, or when he tries to cut it, it stubbornly refuses to tear, or manages to just miss his mouth as he raises it to his face.
Interesting. So, sort of by definition, food that he's attempting to eat is going to be inside his Octoritas. Are you attempting to penetrate that to make this happen?
Oh. Yeah, because it would be that close to him, isn't it? I would do it for everything outside of his Octoritas, then, so that no one else could partake.
Okay, yeah, no, that absolutely works. Outside of his Octoritas, people start chasing vegetables around their plates with their forks and going to bite, a cut of pork off of their utensils, only to have it wiggle off and land with a wet splat on the table. It's a little disturbing to watch. Tyrius takes no notice.
When I caught into what's happening, I also changed the tempo of the drinks in their glasses or goblets. Some of it slows down and becomes solid until, of course, it speeds up and splashes them in the face.
Yeah, the people doing the eating seem bemused and vexed, but muted in their responses to this. Nothing particularly... No one reacts like you would if you were sitting at a Burger King and this started happening to you.
Point of order, Adam. In the site,
yes,
these people,
yes,
are they actual people or are they similar to the meat?
They appear to be people, presumably people who were here in the estate when this happened.
Sure. They're people made of meat only in the ordinary sense.
Right, yes. They're very possible burgers in this case, with an H in it, like a townsman, a burger.
Likely burgers.
Ordinary meat burgers. People.
Boy, that's one of the most tortured puns I've ever done.
It was a long walk, but we got there.
And they have no Octoritas, right?
Nope. They seem perfectly ordinary.
I'm going to do another lesser creation of fury and make them have a reasonable, frustrated reaction to the food not behaving as it should.
You've basically conjured below you at the table at large a cut section of like Fantasia, where a bunch of sort of cartoonishly caricatured aristocrats are grasping and stabbing and leaping and tackling their food all over the table. It's fairly noisy, though the sound is a little muted by just the atmosphere of the place. And
at last, a demonstration of capitalism.
This week's audio political cartoon.
Low grade pandemonium. Again, what's interesting is that they do seem to be reacting more in keeping with like responding to what's happening, but nobody is alarmed or surprised that their food and drink is trying to escape them, just frustrated now that you have miraculously prodded them to be so. And Tyrios still takes no notice, even as the lower table starts to shift and bump.
I'm going to turn the dial progressively as the food becomes more angry about it being eaten and evasive about it. They become more and more angry about its evasiveness, in which redoubles the efforts of the food.
Okay. Yeah. Let me make a roll here. Yeah, you start nudging the sliders up, as it were. This would be mechanical sliders rather than the small burgers, which are not present.
It can be both
at this feast.
If you want it to be.
I have decreed there are no sliders at this feast. The food gets more chaotic in its escape attempts and more forceful, and the people get more frustrated and more forceful in their attempts to capture it. While all this is going on, Tyrios casually turns to Leorian and says, before it's gone, you do want to try the blood sausage. They have a new spice that they've added to the process. I think you'll truly enjoy it. It came, I believe, from across the sea. And right as he finishes saying that, there is the first cry of pain as diners below, in their struggle to consume their food, encounter one another's bodies with their utensils and begin to prod, strike, and poke with them in an increasingly fervent chaos that is climbing towards a general melee with pretty precipitously, shall we say.
Congratulations, you're starting a riot.
We seem, my lord, to be engaged in a whole new way of the blood sausage getting made.
Seeing that there are cries of pain, I am going to also do a lesser creation of fury on the utensils, and make them rebel against any intended facet of their use, be that prodding or slicing or stabbing.
So you're starting a riot, but you're making sure that nobody gets hurt. This is...
The Billy Clubs, too, are rioting, yeah.
So the utensils all rocket towards the table with enough speed to embed themselves in the tabletop, mostly avoiding hands and fingers as they do so. But without missing a beat, the... dinner guests who are in altercations with each other turn to fists, fingernails, knees, elbows, teeth, and the intensity continues to ratchet upward.
Hands, fingers, knees and toes, knees and toes.
Did Tyrios react in any way when I explicitly pointed out the ensuing insouciant melee?
Not really. He kind of gave one of those sort of polite conversational nods when you are acknowledging that somebody has said something but your mouth is full. Given a beat or two, he will, sort of chew and swallow, take a sip from a nearby goblet, and very, sort of conversationally turn to Ramnet and say, so, prophet, was it? I think I may have heard something about that through the grapevine a little while back. It's a bit hazy, but you'll just tell me more.
I was sometime since a member of, a cult, I suppose you could say, but it ended up being orthodox and any others heterodox, so what then is the difference between a cult and a church? I will leave that as an exercise for a god. But...
He chuckles.
I knew things, or rather, was caused to come to know things, and passed those along as best I could translate, and that was generally interpreted as prophecy.
He nods slowly, looking a little thoughtful, and tilts his head at around about the time that one of the benches at the table below breaks with the impact of somebody getting thrown over a shoulder. And his gaze sharpens, and he says, "These prophecies, they came to you from the obsidian god, one presumes?"
One presumes. That may have been related to my then mortal stature and my proximity to the obsidian god, perhaps favor. It is unclear. Also difficult to replicate in the present.
He nods thoughtfully, says, Yes, no, I could see. And he looks a little far away as he takes a spoonful of some kind of pudding and puts it in his mouth. As gesture, the gesture of eating in this case is like thoughtful and pensive, but he seems to just kind of like be going through the motions of a feast there, and he sort of looks contemplative for a long moment there.
I do a lesser destruction of fury, seeing that the violence below-hand is starting to get out of hand. I allow that to linger for long enough for them to gain hopeful self-awareness and watch their expressions with interest.
Okay. You snuff the flame that you had lit, and over this very rapid course of like 2 or 3 seconds, everything sort of like slows to a near halt. People are looking around and sort of blinking, and they each sort of slowly resume their seats and start putting scattered food back on plates, refilling goblets. The broken bench is rapidly replaced with one from further down the table, and a couple of people who are stunned or maybe in 1 or 2 cases unconscious are sort of propped up to one side, and everybody sort of goes back to what they had been doing
when I see
prior.
When I see them resuming their concerning previous behavior, I do another lesser creation of fury. This time, I aim to make it that precise type of fury that makes one storm out of a room.
Everybody at the rest of the table, outside of the various Octoratases, simply freezes for a moment. And after about a slow count of 2, they sort of glance around and begin to like wipe mouths and put down napkins and stand up. This catches Tyrios' attention. And he sort of snaps his gaze down and says, "Wait, no, we're not done yet. Please, continue." And everybody sort of stops and looks uncertain. And he makes no attempt to hide the miracle that he does, though the nature of it is uncertain. But whatever it was, the body language of the other revelers sort of relaxes, and they step back into their seats and are murmuring amongst themselves as they get back to a convivial banquet.
Ah, so the fun is mandatory.
Well, of course, we're celebrating the birth of a god. That must, I think, warrant some celebration. And then he sort of, still looking at you, Ramnet, sharpens his gaze a little bit and says, and actually, on that topic, and he doesn't say anymore, but he sort of gives you an intense look. And you find yourself receiving a prophetic vision. It feels exactly the same as it ever did, only in this case, it is overlaid over what you are seeing with your eyes. You see sort of a double of Tyrios stand and spread his arms, and then you zoom out, still seeing what's in front of you physically, but in the vision, you zoom out and fly upward, and you see the darkness spread out over the city and over the countryside and over the ocean, and you hear the sounds of celebration throughout. And then it's gone. And Tyrios is smiling at you as he turns back to his meal. Seems to be humming to himself.
And did the obsidian god force you to have such merriment?
Well, not as such, no. He doesn't actually look up at you. He's continuing to, eat his dinner. But he says, I would say, though, that was perhaps a policy failure on the obsidian god's part. The lack of presence can be fatally undermining to a leader. Understand that the obsidian god is at least said never to have been human, so it was perhaps not their fault for not realizing the disconnect, but I plan to be a present leader in my people's lives. I think it's what they need.
Did you enjoy your free will when you were immortal?
He shrugs one shoulder casually and says, Who's to say I ever had it? You're not an aristocrat, are you, lass?
No. Though, I must say I find the concept of aristocrats lacking free will amusing.
Well,
it's a paradox they built for themselves. After all, they built a system that constrains them, and therefore requires that they treat others terribly.
He sort of points casually in Ramnet's direction as he winds some sort of pasta around a fork, and he says, Lad has more or less the right of it. Its difference is you don't get asked before you're trained up in it. It's just existed before you, and it'll exist after you. Best you can do is, well, try to discharge your responsibility.
Don't care, of course.
Do not. However, I do. I do care. I do.
And therefore you thrust this personal, not even systemic, lack of free will on your followers?
He blinks at you, turns to look at you, blinks in confusion. He says, I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
The fun is compulsory because you personally say so, rather than because the system of aristocracy demands it. Is that correct?
He chuckles. He says, Oh, I see. No. This, and he gestures at the room, and his voice lowers and becomes rather more intense than you've heard it before. He says, This is a punishment. It's only for those here.
What are they being punished for?
He sort of waves a hand and says, "You know this and that," and seems to think that explains it. His prior intensity forgotten.
I turn to my nearest penitent celebrant and say, "So what are you being punished for?"
The man turns to you. He's a man of middle years, ruddy-faced, seems to have lived well prior to this, though his finery is a little stained now, and he blinks a little owlishly at you, his eyes a little glassy. And Tyrios, for his part, chimes in and says, "Tell him." And the fellow seated by you says, "Well, I am attempted to," as though trying to remember, he trails off for a moment. He says, "I attempted to repossess the city's shrines to the obsidian god as they were built on the dockside territory managed by my family." Yes, that's it.
I'm going to give a pointed look to Romnut, and then for the first time reach to fill my glass. I propose a toast, then.
Tyrios looks thrilled.
To punishment dealt where it is earned.
He grins and raises his own goblet and says, "Well, here, I'll drink to that."
And I make a show of trying to reach his goblet across Leorian.
Mm-hmm.
And then, realizing that I can't, despite my stature, I rise and approach him.
He tracks you as you do so, and sort of continues to extend his goblet, and then blinks and sort of looks into the middle distance, your movement sort of forgotten, and stands, and he says, "My, we have a visitor." And he reaches to the table and sort of rings a little bell. A page appears seemingly out of nowhere, and Lissa, do tell me if at any point you interrupt this proceeding and how. But a page appears sort of out of nowhere, and Tyrios says, "Good lad, tell Timos to let our guest in, lead them in here where I may speak to them." And the page bobs a bow and darts off. And Tyrios goes to sit back down and resume his meal, seemingly having forgotten that you were there.
I clear my throat, still holding the glass out.
Mm-hmm. He sort of blinks and goes, "Oh, my, where is my mind?" And he turns and holds his goblet up in your direction, and then looks at a goblet near him on the table, and swaps them, and holds the second one up, seeming a lot more sure of himself.
Okay. Is he letting me approach him?
Mm-hmm.
To be clear, Robin, neither I nor Romnet know quite what your significant look was for.
That's fair. I mean, that is one of the risks of significant looks.
Because I can't poison his drink, and I'm not gonna poison yours. And I don't know why else you would be giving murder significant looks as you're proposing a toast.
So, I am the funny. What I'm going to do is, as soon as I get close enough to him, but not quite in his Octor toss.
Mm-hmm.
This is an awful gamble. I'm going to pass the helm to Mavia.
Mm-hmm.
which should bring my aspect up to 1, and then I'm going to spend 2 additional aspect miracles to make myself devastatingly fast.
Okay.
And in the smiling approach that I offer him, with the goblin in one hand, I'm going to pull out Feywa's weapon with the second hand.
Okay.
And
are you adding any penetration? Aspect miracles, like other miracles, do need to penetrate the Auctoritas.
It's an aspect miracle on myself outside of his Auctoritas to make me fast. And I believe the rule book has a thing in there saying that aspect miracles that you cast on yourself do not need penetration.
Correct. Yes, that was my misunderstanding of what you were doing. Okay, so you're making yourself devastatingly fast, and you are using Feywa's Bloodstone weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And at current, it is a hilt. Are you doing anything to the weapon itself?
I'll also put fury into the weapon itself,
okay,
to make it whatever it needs to be to kill this god.
Okay. So you can do a creation of fury, for free, gratis. Mm-hmm. Are you? I guess is that the main thing that you are doing, or do you have something else, or more specific, or more juicy in mind?
Is there time, upon my seeing her hand drift toward the hilt, to make of it a murder
weapon? I'm going to say that there is time, yes. Cool. Let me see here where I have. Okay. So, Lissa, you approach.
Real quick,
yes.
As she starts approaching, one other thing happens, which is that I say, "If you'll permit me, my lord, the occasion is just so festive. I don't think that I need to sing for my supper, but..." And I take out my drum. However fast,
dashes his goblet at you and just yells, "No!" Face suddenly apoplectic with rage. Lissa,
good distraction at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
You shift to Mavia. That was part of your plan, right?
Yeah, shifting to Mavia, making myself devastatingly fast, so bringing my aspect to 3. I've already deducted the 2 points.
I am going. A lesser creation is 4, yes? No?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I will drop 5 points for penetration, 4 of them from domain, and 1 from realm, because we're in this realm.
Mm-hmm.
If that works.
So hang on, if you're channeling realm miracle points into a domain miracle, that's 2 to 1.
Oh, then I'll just drop 5 from realm.
Okay.
Or not realm, domain.
Okay.
These words are too similar.
Yeah, I do understand. Okay, so Lissa, you become Mavia and strike out, pouring fury into this needle. The concurrent...
Also,
yes,
we are disrupting a party.
Mm-hmm.
I crush a nettle.
Okay. So, Leorian, you find yourself struck in the face with a goblet hurled with preternatural speed. It's not injurious in any real sense, but it hurts, and you blanch and you have wine in your eyes. It's not pleasant, but no long-lasting effects, maybe a bruise.
I would do my best to strike during that moment of rage and distraction.
And indeed, you have your pick of moments at aspect 3, and sure enough, as you punch forward with this hilt, commensurate with your stab and lightning quick, the bloodstone flows outward from it in sort of less of a long needle-like shape like you saw Feywa use back in Lurenton, but more like a solidly sharp, like triangular kind of mangoche shape. And you punch it, I mean, directly in between two of his vertebrae, about halfway up his back. Not a great place for a puncture wound in your admittedly limited experience of surgical strikes. All the way to the hilt, with enough force to drive him down over the table, and instantly, before he's even down, even at this lightning speed, the revelers all freeze silent in their place. Romnet, you have created into this action a murder and crushed a nettle, more or less simultaneously as the strike lands. And Tyrios, for his part, is driven sort of face first, bent 90 degrees over the table. His face lands directly in his platter, and he stays there as this lightning fast moment.
Where's
concludes.
his heart?
Up.
Where hearts are normally. Yeah, sorry. Well, I'm not sure I was asking that.
In relation, I took it as in relation to your stab wound. It is slightly up and slightly more to the left from where you hit him.
My brain just filled in, like, where is my heart? To the tune of the Pixies.
Can I, since he is face down, can I mortal combat him? And
you're gonna have to be a little bit more specific.
Yeah. Can I rip his heart out from his back?
Let's see.
Sorry, Tyrios. Yes.
If you are using an aspect miracle for your bare hands, or if you are using either your weapon or some of the dinner utensils to carve it out more slowly,
I'm comfortable with using an aspect miracle, because let me see what I would need. I would be probably 2 more points because it's improbable to be able to rip out another person's heart, right?
Yeah. A level 1 isn't quite going to do it, but it's not like incredible.
And my high speed is still in effect, right? So I just would need the strength.
Right.
Okay. I'll go ahead and do that.
All right. So you,
as the general chat is saying, I'm going to be shoving this thing as quickly as possible into my mouth.
So you
thank you, Drew.
I guess let me know if any of this is something you definitely wouldn't do. I'm just narrating what I think makes for the most plausible and cinematic thing. But you've borne him down to the table with the bloodstone weapon, and you feel the tip of it thunk into the table and then retract. The hilt is just kind of in your hand currently, so you kind of stash that and put your left hand on the back of his head, holding it down, that and sort of his shoulder and neck area, as you sort of spear your fingers in between his ribs to get a grasp on his heart. And as you go to yank it out of his chest, his left hand shoots up behind his back and grabs your wrist in not quite a strong enough grasp to immobilize your wrist, but now when you yank, like you're kind of pulling his whole body, up by the shoulder with it. He has not said anything, and it is more or less concurrent with that initial yank that the doors to the banquet hall open. And for anyone who cares to look, the diners, along the tables are still frozen. You're not 100% sure they're breathing, but the doors open and a little bit of light spills in, and you can see sort of the shape of Timos sort of backing away from the door, and another shape of a person walking in. And I don't think anyone here is going to recognize this person, but Drew, out of character, not as Leorian, can you please describe what a somewhat travel-worn Vruta holding a book under one arm would look like?
Well then, my goodness, you would see the kind of person whose face looks like it was built to read, eyes almost hidden in their face, but with more musculature than you would expect from such a person. In other words, a person whose very aspect bespeaks ludicrous and unnatural discipline of one kind or another, and a seriousness that could be infectious or could be infuriating depending on who you are. Short, dark hair, and did I mention serious?
Now, listeners and players alike, do forgive me if I don't hit precisely the mark on his voice. It's been a minute since I have done it. I'm going to do my best. As this book-bearing fellow enters, he takes a quick look around as Mavia jerks again on Tyrios's heart, and again...
I apply some pressure this time, warning that there's not a good option out of this.
Certainly, Tyrios's body sort of convulses and his grip tightens on your wrist, but it isn't doing anything to break your grip on the organ within it. While this happens, the young man who's walked in says, have I come at a bad time? Tyrios, for his part, mumbles, certainly not audibly to the visitor who has entered, but audible to those around him. Is welcome feast.
Don't worry, you're not the one who killed the party.
I
am. And I bite the wrist. I bite the hand restraining my wrist with terrible strength.
You bite the hand preventing you from feeding?
Yes.
I have rolled an opposition die here, and because you are currently Mavia and using some aspect miracles, you bite clean through the joint and tear on your next jerk the heart of Tyrios Calavan out of his chest, shattering 2 of his ribs on the way. Now you have a weakly twitching heart in your right hand.
I take a bite out of it.
Yeah. Anyone paying attention to the young man that the doors are now closing behind will see him swallow heavily and take a shaky breath. Mavia, you take a bite with some relish out of this heart, tearing at the fibrous muscle. It's a bit chewy.
Do I feel anything?
Not immediately, but you're sort of grinding this, chewy hank of heart in your teeth.
If there is indeed any remaining in your hand, I will hold out a hand. A request you can, of course, deny.
I pass it.
Okay.
Then I too shall partake.
Very well.
Partake, pass. Sorry. Wasn't trying to...
I'm glad I wasn't taking a drink during that.
Robin was, hence the apology.
Oh, man.
I don't even know this. But yes, I was.
So, Mavia has a bite, Romnet has a bite,
Yeah, I'll offer the last to Leorian.
Leorian, are you getting in on this?
Yes. Is the door still open, and is Timos still in view, or has he stepped out of the way?
It has swung closed, and before it was starting to close, Timos had retreated.
I nonetheless utter an apology to him, whether he hears it or not, and I finish the remaining portion.
All right. Everybody sort of chews and swallows, and one by one, if you'll allow me to fiat this, turns to look at the bookish gentleman who has entered. The revelers are still frozen in place.
What does he look like with the sight?
He doesn't appear as a power or an imperator or exactly an anchor, but sort of like smudged glass, like there's fingerprint residue in a spiritual sense around him. He also, to the normal mortal vision, looks perturbed. But he's doing a decent job of maintaining his composure.
Sorry, is there anything that we can help you with?
May I fiat that you are saying this as you are like wiping your mouth with the back of your hand?
Oh, absolutely. Romnet hasn't really gotten much of a chance to be a monster.
Indeed. At about this beat, you all do feel something take hold, having partaken of Tyrios' heart. Though you have not the attention to devote to it if you wish to converse simultaneously. You'll have to investigate, in a moment of quiet, exactly what it is you have gained.
I'm investigating. I'm
very well.
I'm not exactly social right now.
That is very fair. So, I would like you. Let me see how I want to handle this. I didn't think about this beforehand. I don't suppose that you have a D6 handy.
Yeah, after a fashion I can.
I don't mind taking just a moment here to make this a little more chaotic.
D6 acquired. I didn't. Oh,
Wonderful.
Hold on. Let me roll a few and just see which ones are feeling me today.
That's
all right,
fair. That's
rolling.
fair.
Oop, no, come back here, you. Rolling D6s.
All right.
Okay, D6 acquired.
Okay, just go ahead and roll 1d6 and tell me what you get on it.
Okay, moving the rest out of my tray here. Come on. 4.
Okay. You find that you have incorporated madness into yourself.
Oh,
you add a secondary domain of madness at level 0.
Okay. Fitting.
For what it's worth, yeah, as a player, your reaction may be, oh shit, but as Mavia, it probably is a little bit more positive. There's a little synergy there, at least. In any case, Ramnat, you have asked if you can help the visitor, and he sort of bobs his head, not exactly nervously, but with a little bit of uncertainty, and he says, I think perhaps I can help you. Are there no lights in this place? He seems to be retreating to mundanity as a little bit of a defense against exactly what he has walked in on.
How long would it take to investigate?
Oh, not too long, but it would be obvious that your attention had drifted inward.
At his, is there no light in this place? I will hold up a finger and take a moment to introspect.
Okay. Roll, if you have one handy, to roll a d6.
I do. Let me fish it out of this mug here.
Listeners, for the record, I am watching what is happening on Robin's character sheet as she adds this, and it's very fun.
My title at 0 of madness is mild cray cray.
I have rolled a 1.
Okay. You find within yourself a kernel of darkness. You may add a secondary domain of darkness at level 0.
Ooh.
I don't investigate. I ask the young man, help us. And as I do this, I wipe away whatever remaining blood might be on my face as best I can.
Can I ghost miracle the darkness up a bit?
Sure, yeah. You are now, nominally in control of it. You sort of, tell it to chill for a minute. And sure enough, the light levels become more commensurate with the light sources on the table.
That should help. No?
He nods and says, "Oh, yes, thank you, I think." He walks forward a little bit, not quite approaching the foot of the table, and bobs just sort of an informal bow, clutching a large, seemingly wooden, sort of codex-style folio covered in leather for the covers, to his chest. He sort of bows a little bit and looks around and says, it might be an overstatement to say I was sent, but I thought I should come here. I've found something that I think might be helpful, if indeed I have the right people. Where are my manners? I am Vruta, a novice scholar of the Confluence. And he sort of bobs his head again.
Did you happen to know at one point somebody named Dask?
He grimaces slightly and then says, yes, I certainly did. I think that means I have the right party, then, if you'll pardon the pun.
We are his friends, and his
and he's our boss.
He's our boss. It's a complicated thing. Apologies, you came in at a strange
very odd time.
I
gathered, but
for whatever it's worth, it's good to meet you. I think, or hopefully, it's good to meet you. But Dask is in the habit sometimes of just sort of going on a litany of people to whom he wishes he could apologize. And for the record, you do sometimes make the list.
He blinks once and goes, "Oh, wow. Yes, no, that tracks. Well, you seem to know me rather more than I know you." And looking at Mavia, he says, "I suppose this is just what it's like to interact with demigods." And then sort of blinks and gestures at the frozen revelers and says, "Are they all right?"
Remains to be seen, I think.
I was hopeful they would recover once he was gone.
I suspect that whoever got revelry can assist there.
Whoever got... at this point, I look upward.
And indeed, you find that you are now very tenuously in charge of revelry, and you may add revelry as a secondary domain at 0.
I will do.
Did my nettling accomplish anything? Or was it just a nice little sting?
So, actually, I'm glad you asked, because it wasn't significant enough for it to be super noticeable, but introspecting, sort of taking your taking stock of yourself, you find that you have a modicum of power from it, and you may put 2 miracle points on whichever meters you desire.
Cool. Made the murder cheaper.
Well, as I realize that I have some control over the domain of revelry, what I try to do is turn the revelry back up, but to a reasonable amount. I channel Lissa's particular scrupulousness about consent, and I try to present exactly the revelry amount that each participant would desire.
Interesting. That's gonna require miracle points if you want to be that specific about it, since you're at level 0 on revelry.
I feel like these people deserve it.
Okay.
How many am I pulling from elsewhere, and how does that... Is it like right at the last Trump style? Like it's 2-1?
Well, it's domain.
Okay.
It's domain, and
Gotcha. It's just that one's at 0. I've been a one domain guy for quite a while.
Your domain miracle points are shared among your domains if you have multiple ones. So
gotcha.
If it's at 0, let's see, we'd be looking at like a lesser creation probably, or a lesser change if you wanted to have somewhat more fine-tuned control over it. So that would be 4 or 6 miracle points if you wished to go that direction.
I think we can adjust afterwards if it's not perfectly fine-tuned, but I think they deserve something nice after what they've been through, so I'll spend the 4.
Okay. So yeah, you create what you consider to be an appropriate level of revelry, and all of them immediately fall over forward pretty unceremoniously, but then do pick themselves up and sort of look around a little bemusedly and have a seat. They're not so intent on feasting as before, but rather sort of like looking around nervously, and a couple of them take swigs of wine.
You're safe now.
Your guest chuckles somewhat uncertainly and says, yes, well, my name is Vruta.
That was to the revelers.
Oh, I see.
Not Vruta, sorry.
The revelers sort of look at you, and a few of them blanch, and one of them goes, does that mean we can leave?
You have been used and abused by gods. You're free to do as you wish. But if you are to worship any god, let it be one that was once mortal and the one who has freed you. The god of nothing, Dosk.
Right you are, madam. And he backs away and then runs from the room, and the other revelers follow very quickly. You do not know, or I should say, I'm not sure if Mavia is thinking about this in particular, but the 3 of you do not know whether they will be able to leave the estate or not, but they certainly leave the banquet hall.
We'll cross that orb of darkness when we come to it.
Mm-hmm.
I can probably, solve that problem.
Yes.
I say to Vruta, it should be stressed, are safe as well.
Indeed.
And welcome.
Thank you. Sorry. To whom do I have the pleasure of speaking?
Romnet, I will look at Mavia.
I, as Mavia, say, I am Fury, Lissa Crate, friend of Dosk, and I was first ennobled with him. In fact, I believe I was party to when he zooped into your mind.
So does this mean you are shifting back to Lissa?
As maybe I'm saying these things.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I had it clear.
Mm-hmm.
Vruta sort of blinks a couple times and says, that is mortifying. However, it is a pleasure. And he sort of bows his head again and then sort of looks around and says, does anyone know where we might go to have a seat and a private conversation?
I'm keen to get out of here myself.
Are we looking to leave the chancel entirely, or just find a different room to be in?
I would settle for a room that had better lighting and comfortable chairs.
Well, let's go exploring, shall we?
I may need to speak to an old friend whose father we just ate.
I dropped the aspect of Mavia at that.
Yeah. And you were Alyssa again, and Vruta relaxes visibly at this. And sure enough, as you turn to leave the room, Timos rushes up to Leorian. Whatever happened in there?
Well, as we warned, There was no saving him.
He is at peace now, at least, and he no longer has...
I'm sorry, are people covering up the body at this point?
No, it's just leaned over the head of the table with a ragged hole in the back.
Looking very peaceful.
I honestly was going to take that action, but then it kind of moved ahead of me being able to do that as Lissa.
Gotcha. You can track back and do it now if you wish.
Yeah, let's do
that. We're like, I was like, oh, I turn into Maybe. I dropped the aspect of Maybe at this point, and then it just kept going, and I was like, I'm not going to get a chance to do anything about the body.
Sorry. Oh, okay, yeah.
In which we are accidentally, well, semi-accidentally, complete fucking monsters.
I would at least like try to put the cloth around him and lay him down so he was flat and there was no gaping chest hole. Or also, I'd probably try to just stick the hand kind of near where it should be.
Since we're wrapping him anyway. Yeah.
And then roll it up in the tablecloth. Hopefully I'm still super strong so that I can make a full-on Cheerios burrito that would be easy to transport and not give away all the damages done.
You do it unnatural fast, too, because I can help with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you move quickly, though your aspect miracle has since worn off. You are still Lissa strong, which is plenty strong. And you take care of
I will
this.
actually help as needed, despite, being ornamentally pretty.
The two of you take care of this while Leorian talks to Timos. He is at peace now, wrapping up the body in the background. And Timos sort of bows his head and sort of nods and says, I understand. Thank you for coming to see to it. Would it be all right if I retired for the evening?
More than
certainly. I'm not there.
Yeah, he sweeps a hasty bow and power walks away. In the background, Ramnet and Lissa finish swaddling Tyrios' body in a tablecloth and lay it in a dignified position, and presumably then join Leorian and Vruta in the antechamber.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Leorian, I think you're the only one who knows his way even slightly around this estate.
Yeah. Let's see. I know of a room that Timos would sometimes use to give me lure lessons. It's on this floor. It's large. It's large enough to make us comfortable, but not so large that it'll seem a cavern. I think I'd take us there.
Very well. So, Leorian, you lead your party and Vruta to nearby. You feel comfortable calling it a sitting room or a parlor, despite the fact that you usually use it as a rehearsal space. It's fairly nicely appointed, but it's not one of the official receiving rooms either. And it has a rich, warm lamp glow in it that is only somewhat tempered by the influence of darkness within the sphere. Plenty of comfy seating for everyone. And unless I hear otherwise, I'm going to assume that everybody chooses a seat. Vruta chooses one where he can put his codex down on a nearby surface, in this case. Something that we would probably call a coffee table.
I would certainly call it a coffee table.
I get the feeling that to both Dez and Ramnet, nearly all tables are coffee tables, at least potentially.
Potentially, certainly.
Indeed.
Once seated and book deposited, Vruta sort of looks apprehensively around, waiting for everyone else to arrange themselves and trying, it seems, to collect his thoughts.
I pick up my teeth.
Oh, wow.
You are magnificent and horrifying, my friend.
Yes, yes. Higher praise there never was. After a moment of that, I say, take all the time you need after the spectacle you just walked in on, but you said you were sent, or nearly so.
Oh, yes, well, I don't think that His Doskliness has elected me for anything in particular, but as you may know, as you seem to know, I was connected to him in some way before he transcended his mortality, and I've been having some dreams ever since.
I'm just mouthing to myself, His Doskliness. With, like, the glee of somebody who has found something new to make fun of a person with.
Ruta continues and says, I had some trouble leaving the confluence, but I think that in the end I was able to make a case for a somewhat semi-permanent change in policy there. I proceeded to, without exactly being able to put my finger on why, to track down, and he reaches out and sort of rests his hand lightly on the book cover. He says, to track down something I think will be useful. I don't know if you'd have heard of it. It was somewhat legendary at the confluence, though. This is, as far as I can tell, the only Taraxan copy of the Currents of the Cosmos.
Is that the book that Dusk was looking for that got him ascended?
Indeed it is.
It's also the book that our visitors in Vermata were asking for.
Indeed it is.
I lean forward at that name. Whatever gristle remains in my teeth temporarily forgotten.
He sort of glances at you and Verta says, I see that you are somewhat familiar. It was held in the library in Selvin, though it had been lost in the stacks. I was able to locate it in a matter of days, which seems somewhat unlikely. But since then, I've been following my feet, as they say, and perusing the text, and, well, if, and his voice becomes somewhat more intense, if you can keep it safe, you are welcome to keep it. And then he sort of subsides to his previous tone. But I can tell you a little of what might be useful from within it. I suppose this must have been my calling from Dosk, though I haven't heard from him.
He mentioned you numerous times and fondly, namely after we accidentally ended up in the basement of the confluence. I think we did that a couple of times, actually. We were still mastering travel.
He snorts a laugh and says, yes, that, I suppose, sounds right. He'd be much more willing to talk about me than talk to me. And then he sort of shakes his head and says, it's probably not proper to talk about one's god like that, but, well, forgive me.
A god though he may be,
as
he's
an
still
ex of
Dosk.
his, shit-talking him is occasionally a perquisite.
Ruta sort of chuckles and runs a hand through his hair and sighs and says, well, the book is beyond ancient. Even this translation of it seems to have originated prior to even the founding of Calavan. But this copy is somewhat newer and only centuries old rather than millennia. It is something of a wonder it survived at all. I can only think that somebody was looking out for it in a metaphysical sense. Who knows what's missing? And then he shakes his head and says, you don't care about catechology.
Lore to know what the hell that is?
Yeah, go ahead.
Pair of ones.
He's talking about the study of the history and provenance of manuscript texts. as a discipline.
Sure.
And,
don't actually say that.
Sure, yeah. He sort of gathers his thoughts for a moment and says, "It concerns primarily the nature of gods. Imperators is how it translates the term. I don't know how widely you use that terminology is in the present day, but it is remarkably candid in some places and remarkably circuitous in others, at least in this translation."
Would you recommend us read it if we had a miraculous means of doing so expediently?
Well, certainly, though I can try to summarize the more salient points, particularly if you have need of specific knowledge. I've read it cover to cover 3 or 4 times by now.
So what you're saying is that we must also keep you safe, as you're essentially a walking book.
Well, I would certainly like to be kept safe, he chuckles.
Everyone in the Confluence, on my understanding, is something of a walking book.
Has anyone else read this one?
As far as I can tell, I'm the first to peruse it in centuries.
So we should take you to board to see Dosk later.
Oh, well, if we must.
It's the safest place I can think, because right now...
At a minimum, you'll be able to talk to him.
Yes.
And say whatsoever you please.
And
that's what I was afraid of.
Not to alarm you, but there's been other gods attempting to find this book, and would seek to use it for their own devices, the vessel itself containing the information be damned.
Not to be contrary, but that is alarming.
Yes, I suppose it is. I could have delivered that better. Forgive me, you caught me.
I will hold up the just a little gesture.
You walked in at a moment where I had allowed my temper to get the best of me.
He waves
Nobody quite says when you had a heart in your mouth.
Yeah. He waves his hand.
Not your heart in your mouth, though. I'm sorry, please.
Ruta waves his hand dismissively and says, think nothing of it. Well, one expects something out of the ordinary when they deal with demigods, I suppose. The Confluence, for what it is worth, I did my best to see to it that they would venerate nothing before I left. I appeared to have some assistance from on high, he says with a wry tinge to his voice, because I've never been that persuasive otherwise, but who knows how long it will keep.
So the contents of the book, then?
Yes. Do you know... Well... how to say this? The book suggests that the number of imperators shrinks over time.
Yes.
Do you know which ones currently exist?
Sirtha, Celiand, the Deep. Dosk, of course. Dosk. What else? Would I remember any others?
Well, Ventis isn't.
Oh, Ventis is still. Yeah, Ventis is recovering. Yes.
Yeah. He nods slowly. Well, this, and he lays a hand on the book, suggests that there were once hundreds, and that the number dwindles over time in cycles. It is a text of incredible antiquity. I know not who penned it, but they seem to have done so in an era where only one imperator remained, and there was at least some history of a time when there had been others.
Did that imperator take the shape of rock?
It mentions nothing of the imperator's physical form, I'm afraid. It is rather more general in its contents. But it suggests that this competition is basic and fundamental to the nature of our world, and offers some hypotheses on how imperators may experience that process.
As he says that, I stifle a belch.
If I'm close enough, I pat Leorian on the back.
Vruta studiously refrains from reacting to any of that. And he says, what appears to be the case is that as the number of imperators dwindles, the breadth of power of each imperator increases. They take on responsibilities that once belonged to their colleagues. As the number of responsibilities increases, the book suggests that the personality of the gods in question diffuses somewhat. It's speculated that they may even be able to temporarily divide into multiple agents and reunite later. But this is pure hypothesis in the text. What I think may be most useful to you is the fairly well-supported argument that all it really takes for the cycle to reach its, next stage is for there to be a last god standing.
And what does the next stage entail?
It's an odd term that the text uses. Monotheism.
So, this is all, we went to the God's Woods, and that was where the head of the previous Overgod,
as we've been referring to it,
dwelled, and they destroyed
themselves. He holds
themselves.
up a finger and says, just a moment, and fishes around in his pockets and pulls out a small, commonplace book, and fishes out from another area a vial of ink and a quill pen, dips it and says, scribbles a little bit and says, very well, continue.
They destroyed themselves and restarted the cycle anew. Does the book suggest any methods of breaking the cycle?
Well, not in so many words, no. It suggests, however, that the inevitable end of the cycle is a redistribution of responsibilities among newly created imperators. That the author hypothesizes that the nature of time is cyclical, that there is a move from what it calls monotheism to a more familiar distribution of powers among the gods, and then a slow consolidation of power back into a single god, and then repeat these things coming together, contracting, and then diffusing over the course of millennia. The author, I should hasten to add, does not offer any concrete evidence for this hypothesis, but it is internally consistent.
I suppose no mortal lifetime would offer enough perspective. Yeah? The last time there was monotonous theism?
Bless you, Drew. The last Overgod. It's unclear whether it was a death that was a suicide, but the redistribution that you speak of was the result of its death.
It was a sacrifice, right?
And its last thoughts were fury and loneliness.
Ruta nods a little bit, and assuming that character was out of question, that question was out of character,
Mm-hmm.
Robin. Yes, it was a sacrifice of self.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And Ruta sort of nods consideringly and says, "No, that is consistent with the author's theories. I wish we knew something more about the biography of the writer, but it's lost in the mist of time."
In your esteemed knowledge and familiarity with this text, why would Imperators already familiar with this cycle seek this book?
Well, it has some theories about the nature of imperial power that I suppose could be strategically useful, because, you see, gods differ quite a bit one from another, and, well, the author theorizes that the more of what it calls domains a given god controls, the more diffuse that god becomes. Something of a handicap, as even the strongest man overloaded with cargo will become slower and less capable than someone much weaker than he. There are also some, well, I say theories, but the author speaks with surprising confidence on a couple of matters that I do not know how they might have had knowledge of beyond divine revelation. But past a certain point, though the author does not claim to know precisely where the balance tips, it would seem that gods... Well, the word in the translation that I have is digestion. It takes time to incorporate new parts. Or at least so it would seem to the author of this book. This could perhaps, well, the author hypothesizes that it could be a vulnerability of sorts.
So I will at this point look at Lissa and just say, so we need to punch Celiand in the stomach repeatedly.
I like the idea of that.
Well, the other interesting bit that isn't accounted for in modern religion, it supposes that gods can, well, separate their essences into several parts. There is a process, a defensive one, called a chancel in the book.
Yes.
That... Oh, I see.
We are in one.
Oh, perhaps you can verify for me then. Does it require 100 murders?
Yes.
I assure you, as murder, unfortunately it does.
Vruta seemingly unconsciously leans away from you a little bit.
Fair.
Well...
Just because I'm in charge of it doesn't mean that I'm all that big a fan of it.
Right, of course. My apologies. He bobs his head a couple of times in your direction.
No need to worry.
Well,
it's all very strange.
Yes. Well, so... Forming a chancel is a defensive maneuver for an imperator, according to the book, that keeps one's substance together, but limits one in its ability to act on its own agency. I believe, and he gestures to the three of you, that demigods like yourselves are a result of this process. Agents that the god can use in the world while enchanceled.
The need for agents, sure. we believe that to be the case as well.
Indeed. But if one doesn't create a chancel, it is hypothesized by the author that they can have sort of an emanation from their core essence that can travel the world independently. A sort of, well, pseudo-demigod, I suppose? Something that looks and acts a little bit more like a human. And, well, that having such an emanation could leave the remaining essence of the god in a somewhat vulnerable state. You understand this is all hypothesis on the author's part, but it seemed like tactically valuable information.
A remarkable amount of it we can verify. So that which we cannot seems likely to be useful indeed.
I'm assuming the book looks normal on the site and does not have another Tortoise.
Yeah, it's just wood pulp. Actually, in this case, it's not paper. It's parchment. So yeah, it's animal hide, wood, other animal hide in the sense of leather, ink, and thread.
I'm going to do a major divination and ask whose fury wrote this book.
Interesting. Okay. Whose fury wrote this book? You get an ambivalent sense that you interpret as the book was written self-consciously in an academic calm. But the reason you get that information is because buried underneath it was a deep, deep well of absolutely molten hot fury. And you get a brief mental image of a man with refined, pale features and what seemed to you to be rather disparate, clashing, and even rudimentary garments. There's cloth, there's fur, there's ornaments made of bone and wood, but no metal that you can see. He seems young, and yet carries a heavy weariness with him. And you become certain that the original version of this book, many, many copies back from the one you're looking at now, was not written in ink, but in blood, though whose or what's you don't know.
I relay this information out loud as I see it.
Vruta looks taken aback.
I will spend the necessary 1 domain point for a greater divination and inquire what within this book can be a murder tool.
Interesting. Greater divination, you say?
Yes.
As you pose this question internally, the cover of the book snaps open on the table, and the pages whisk. And near the end, about 3/4 of the way through, it settles on a page. The handwriting is too ancient and ornate to be immediately legible, even to you, Ramnet. But Vruta leans forward interestedly and says, "Oh, well, this is fascinating. This is the page, well, one of the pages about emanations. The substance of an imperator that emanates part of itself into the mortal world is mostly inert, you see. And if you can locate it, physically or metaphysically, it is, well, vulnerable. It cannot act in mortal perceptions of time on its own until the emanation reunites. The awareness, the consciousness, if you will, travels with the emanation. At least, so says the author. It seems that we have enough confirming pieces of information that it is not unreasonable to trust the person who wrote it.
We're in a chancel, right?
You are.
And in a chancel you can divine anything.
Well, it has to be your
chancel.
Which I think we should go there anyway, but...
Yep.
And it has to be, you can divine anything so long as it's within the chancel itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are limited by what the chancel contains, but within that you can divine anything using realm.
Okay.
I'm going to pray to Ventus.
Okay. What do you say?
Hello, friend. You are still recovering, but I need you to know that you are vulnerable. And I reiterate some of the information from the book, without saying its source, because I don't need that particular information out in the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
If you need shelter, seek me out, pray to Fury, and it will be provided. I still carry your weapon and have wielded it, so I hope that gains some trust. But know that you're being hunted by a predator, and we need you safe.
As a response, you hear distantly and metaphysically in your mind a very high-pitched, almost reedy, yep. And the connection is gone.
Hopefully Puff understands. Okay.
Vruta, in the meantime, has sort of scanned the page and then gently closes the book and says, I don't wish to speak with confidence that has not been earned by direct experience, but, well, if there are so few imperators left as you say, presumably many of them have quite a few domains.
It seems likely.
In that case, it seems safe to say that they would be using emanations to act in the world, and thus leaving the remainder of their substance vulnerable if we could but locate it.
Yes.
So, I don't rightly know how to do that. But, do you?
I'm sure we can find a way.
I failed to stifle a belch.
Of course you do.
Odask. I know that you are not Dask.
Right.
But at that point, I will pray to Dusk.
Mm-hmm.
We have someone who's not thrilled to meet with you, but may need your protection. And likely a long-term stay in Bor. It's going to be awkward, and, well, you'll see. But we may also have a way to figure things out.
The response you get is, don't suppose you could be any more specific than that?
We've got a visitor in the book from Confluence.
Oh! Connection breaks.
He's going through a tunnel.
I feel like you just did the equivalent of doing shh. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Signal bad.
More or less.
I propose we close this chancel and make our way to Bor.
Agreed.
The darkness, I think, is what was keeping people in. Are we sure they can leave should they wish? And I think they might wish.
I would like to make sure that the darkness does indeed not keep people in.
I'd rather have it wiped myself.
Oh, for sure. That's the next step to our leaving.
Well, so yeah, the way to exercise any particular agency over this chancel is to track down those murders from outside of it that you sensed earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, a more permanent solution, indeed.
Virtus seems particularly nervous at the idea of going to Bor, but has not said anything, just gotten
Do you have
twitchy.
an objection to being in Dusk's care?
Not a mature and rational one, no.
That seems to be the case on both ends, then.
I suppose that is minimally comforting. It's fine. He closes the book and picks it up and holds it in his lap and sort of stares at it a bit.
I look at Lissa as though to say, does that constitute consent?
I misinterpret it as a look of, is he okay? And I nod.
They're not unrelated questions.
Sure, yeah.
So given that order of operations, I think our first step is for me to take us out of this place.
Certainly, you, especially from within, have a relatively easy time leading your party to a point of egress in the Dome of Darkness, and you find yourself standing on one of any number of streets in the well-to-do areas of Calavan, though not one that you personally, Romnet, have been on before, so you are slow to find your bearings. But you can fairly easily figure out which direction your 100 murders of enchantment are coming from. And
they're all coming from one place.
Indeed, relatively close together. And
that's
you
awkward.
Sort of orient yourself in that direction. You're facing down the hill, you think towards the sea.
Okay. I will continue to play Bloodhound.
Certainly. It is by this point late afternoon in Calavan, and you make your way through somewhat but not overly crowded streets, closer and closer to the Waterside District. As you near the area sort of around the elevated harbor wall and subsequent docks and jetties, you find yourself in the midst of 100 murders, sort of, if you'll allow me a fanciful use of words here, spattered around 3 or 4 blocks approximate to one part of the harbor side.
Is there a time frame to the murders?
Well, they all seem to have been, well, I suppose relatively is not a useful term here. A significant number of them happened very close to one another, and then the remainder sort of trickle through over the last couple of months, maybe a little bit more.
Oops. Are you relaying any of this information to us?
For
the better.
Daz is shaking his head.
I meanwhile have spotted a little bit of blood on my shirt, and I'm like kind of trying to rub it out with a little bit of spit and just trying
The
to...
only improvement on darkness would have been secrets,
Yeah.
as previously discussed. Will a lesser destruction of murder suffice for all of these?
It will not. You're talking about 100 individual murders spread out over a few months. You're going to need a greater destruction to handle all of them at once.
So that's level 8 then?
Major destruction is level 8, yes.
That is 4 miracle points then. So, yeah. Easy come, easy go, my friends.
Quite.
But I will drop the 4 for it on the assumption that I don't actually need to put penetration behind this, since there's no god remaining to be so enchanted.
Indeed not. You feel the miracle successfully take hold, nothing opposing it, and sure enough, you can't hear with your ears so much as feel with your soul as the bubble of darkness behind you and up the hill vanishes.
I breathe a sigh of relief.
You hear Vruta murmur under his breath, "Remarkable."
Well, shall we be going?
Vruta clutches the book to his chest and says, "Going. Yes. I suppose we shall."
Do you have any embarrassing Dosk stories?
Please have embarrassing Dosk stories.
I'm afraid that all the stories that embarrass him embarrass me as well.
Tragic. But I would not ask you to embarrass yourself.
Never.
Kind of you. Well, I will never be more ready than I am. He gives a wan smile.
I think then we go to Boar.
Lie back and think of nothing.
Woof.
You're welcome, Adam.
Woof. Sure enough, in short order, the 4 of you arrive in the windswept plains of Bor, and Vruta looks around and sort of makes a noise and murmurs, "I don't know what I expected."
He's trying to make it a little bit more accommodating. There was less here previously, if you could believe it.
Goodness. Well, it's hard to imagine, but I suppose that is par for the...
I mean, the problem is that he is nothing. Centrally.
As you mentioned also, these places are first and foremost defensive measures. I believe his primary concern was not to be devoured.
Right, he says somewhat
He
faintly.
really pissed off our former boss in the process of his promotion. Hey boss, we're back. I will just sort of raise my voice.
You hear internally in response, right, and who is we?
Your 3 employees and a scholar.
You have the sensation in your mind of a heavy sigh. Right, well...
He's got that book you were looking for.
There's a longish pause followed by, what? Oh. And then the scenery blurs. And you find yourself in the sketched-in version of the nightcap that serves as the heart of the chancel here. And a rudimentary charcoal scribble of a silhouette of a person leaning back casually in a bar stool against the bar with a glass held in one hand as though it is of no consequence.
Adorable.
And as you appear and orient yourself, Verto looks around in mild alarm, and Dusk says, well, welcome to the heart of the chancel. It is good to see you. Oh, hello, Verta. What have you got there? Verta, for his part, sort of looks to either side and then up and around and looks at the sketched-in silhouetted figure and says, Dusk? Is that
Behold,
you?
the representation of the god of nothing.
Verta looks at you, looks to the other side at Lissa, and holding your gaze, Lissa, he gestures ambiguously with the book, seemingly asking you a question. Lissa, would you roll sense plus empathy, 2 plus a master die for me?
Oh, thank you. I had nothing over here. That's going to be 2 10s.
2 10s. Excellent. I couldn't have hoped for better. He seems to be asking you if it would be a huge problem for him to wallop Dosk with the book.
I don't know the history here, but I don't think it'll do any damage.
Dosk looks at you and says, what won't do any? And then Verta takes both hands on the book and sort of sidelong swings the book into the side of Dosk's head. And there is a thunk, and Dosk sways in the bar stool as Verta backs up rapidly. Dosk sort of shakes his head a little bit and goes, okay, yeah, no, I definitely deserve that.
Okay.
It's becoming apparently a bit of a tradition around here.
Yeah, no, justifiably so. I'm glad you're safe, Verta, and
It's part of why we brought him here. He has, after all, read that book several times now.
Well, then thank you for visiting, and as much as good as it may do, I am sorry. Verta sort of sighs and goes, it doesn't matter. Hopefully I can help. And sort of gestures with the book, which is none the worse for wear, being leather-covered wood in its binding.
Leather-covered wood that just hit nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And
your grammatical torture continues, Drew.
I asked for this.
Dusk sort of gestures to the bar next to him and says, well, I guess come and tell me what you've uncovered here, and we'll see what conclusions we can come to at the very least. Verta sort of nods with a little bit of trepidation and moves up to the bar stool next to Dosk and puts the book on the bar, opening the front cover and sort of waiting expectantly. Presumably something of a summary of the explanations that you all got is to follow. Is there anything?
I will point him directly toward the bit about emanations and their vulnerability upon finding them. My domain found this particular passage relevant.
I see. No, this makes perfect sense.
Trouble is, well, one, Tyrios Caliban became another remnant of our former employer.
Ugh.
That's toothsomely dealt with, and I think on a permanent basis now.
At that, I start aggressively pouring myself a glass of whatever I get my hands on first, swishing it around, spitting it out, and then swigging it whole.
I will hold my hand out for a glass as well.
And I also pour one for you once I have gargled with...
I will gargle, spit into a different vessel, and hand the remains of the glass to Leorian.
I examine it for a moment, and then I emanate revelry in a wave around me to the bar just to see what it will do. And I keep staring at the glass.
Place, not that much, although the definition of the environment sharpens a bit, and you think you hear a hint of wild music on the air before it fades again. For what it's worth, Lissa, you have no idea what you've grabbed because all the bottles in this place are just quick sketches of bottles. But it burns going down, and that's what matters.
I shrug and join the group fully, and
but we expended some power doing that, and then I expended some further in the process of undoing yet another motley chancel.
Oh, well, I mean, well done.
Apparently the Confluence may worship you now, so there's that.
Dosk considers for a moment and says, no, that makes more sense than I thought it would. And he looks to Vruta, and Vruta sort of shrugs a shoulder, and Dosk sort of claps him on the shoulder and says, no, for real, though, well done. Thank you. Vruta looks a little uncomfortable and pours himself a glass of something that hopefully will go down well. And turns to Dosk and says, I can only hope that the information that I've found is useful. Principle among them, we can't, of course, allow this competition to result in a last god standing. As that god would then just, ascend. So there's a balancing act to be done here. Dosk sort of nods and says, show me through the book, and we'll see what we can piece together from our experiences and what's contained here, and maybe we can come up with a bit of a strategy.
Our hope is to destroy the upward pull that we have been referring to as the throne.
Vruta nods slowly and says, it may just be possible. Everything is so symbolic in all of this. But it'll be hard enough, even unopposed. So, whatever opposition you face, I think we should probably try to deal with it first. Or
I definitely think
necessary.
that dealing with Sealand is a necessary precondition for this all, yes.
When you say Sealand's name, Vruta's eyes go a little bit unfocused. They stay that way for at least a few moments, so if anybody else was following that up with something, this is a good time.
Are you okay?
there's a long count of 2, and then Fruta sort of goes, okay, yeah, no, I'm fine. Celiand, you said. For some reason...
Yes. Beauty, truth, betrayal.
He sort of sags on the bar a little bit, and he says, oh, gods, I think I may be a prophet. And buries his head in his hands.
Did you have a vision?
Yeah, something like that. Dusk sort of claps him on the shoulder and says, wow, that's impressive. I didn't... Well, what did you see? And Vruta sort of speaks through the heels of his palms and says, a feast. I think the Imperator you just mentioned may have eaten something or someone. But that means that they'll be digesting for a while. So...
Dusk?
Uh-huh.
He needs a shard, so that he cannot be an agent of betrayal.
Oh, Dusk looks askance at Vruta and goes, do you think you'd be okay with that? And Vruta sort of regards him questioningly and goes,
I'm very sorry, Vruta, but we are literally up against betrayal. And you appear to be her prophet.
Oh, well, that's not good. And Dusk sort of bobs his head glumly and says, No, it's not. Well, if you're okay with it, I can offer you a couple of things, honestly. If you want, you could have Shadow or Rot or Flare. And Vruta sort of goes from nodding glumly to cocking his head in confusion and goes, Flare like a bright light or flare like
panache?
And he sort of points, and Dusk cocks his head and goes, kinda both, I think? And Vruta sort of buries his head in his hands and murmurs, I shouldn't have left the confluence. Dusk sort of awkwardly pats his shoulder.
I mean, you could take madness if you prefer it. And I smiled toothfully.
No, that's quite all right, thank you. That's okay. Oh.
Would be a little bit fitting if you took Shadow, given that I already have Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
by the way, we've each got new.
You ate. Speaking of, could you describe? Did you see what she was eating, or who? Could you give us a solid description?
Oh, well,
or conceptual.
It seemed kind of abstract or symbolic, but she seemed to be taking a bite out of the moon.
Oh, Sirtha may be down.
Oh, okay. Honestly, if I guess I get a choice, and Das goes, no, you don't have to do anything. Vruta waves his hand and says, no, I don't want to be a patsy. I suppose I'd go for Flare, if I had to take one. And Dusk sort of holds out a hand and says, well, the process is at least a little bit involved in some cases, so will you retire to a little bit of privacy with me? And Vruta sort of gives a rueful smile and says,
welcome to the familia.
He bobs his head in Ronet's direction and says, I suppose it's better to be here than on the sidelines, and pats a hand on the book and says, I'm going to leave it here for you to peruse. Just take care of it. And follows Dusk out of the room. If there is anything immediate that you wish to get up to here, Now is the time to tell me.
Apropos of, I guess, the visual of Celia eating the moon. Right. Big moon-sized pizza pie, as it were. A moon pie. It was right there and I missed it.
Happy Mardi Gras, everybody. Hey.
I'll do a quick combination of two things. The first is that I'll reach out to Apatia to make sure she's okay, because the moon is also very Nyx-like, and I need to confirm that it's Cirtha, even though Nyx has been gone for a hot minute.
Yeah, Apatia seems to be just where you left her, though you can't get a high-resolution picture of what may be going on there.
Okay. And the next thing I'll do is recalling the nature of Nyx's death and the fact that she's just now seeing, or Cirtha. Recalling the nature of Cirtha's death recalls the nature of Nyx's death clearly in my mind. So I am going to do a greater divination, asking in what form predation was in this realm. And I guess I need to use a realm miracle for that, don't I? Hold on.
So the question is, in Boar, what
yes,
form does
in
predation
Boar,
take?
This is where Nyx was killed.
Right.
Functionally, was this a question of whether Nyx was an emanation, or...
I mean, that wouldn't be a bad question to ask. I was trying to find out more about the imperator or presumed power of predation, since it had to have been here.
Mm-hmm. So, asking this question, you get a picture that you instinctually understand as symbolic, metaphorical, of Celiand with predatory canines and somewhat feline claws in place of her hands. But it's not hard to notice that the teeth and the claws are all visually similar to the appearance of Bloodstone and wreathed in power. Now, to be clear, you saw no such things physically when Celiand interacted with Nyx in Boar. You are getting information about the underlying nature of that interaction.
Okay. I relay that information or that visual to everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that Celiand herself might be in charge, have control over it. I don't think she's entrusted it to a Nobilis based on that.
Are you still part of... You're still in charge of the Forge, yes, no?
No.
I can't... Okay, the Forge... I couldn't remember whether it had been gotten back. This is out of character, to be clear.
I can ask the hilt. I hold it up as I say that.
It may be worth knowing what it is.
Well, Bloodstone. A murder weapon of the gods.
Sure, but I recall also it being referred to as the body.
So then, whose?
The Tohil's former. No, not Tohil's. Was it Tohil or Thralda?
The material in the case of the Bloodstone that you first encountered was the body of Zalaban, the Imperator of the depths of the earth, of stone, of metal, and of perseverance, who was once Tohil's Imperator.
Okay, it was Tohil.
So,
that's right.
The phrasing of that further begs my next question, namely, is all Bloodstone of Zalaban? Or is Bloodstone just the body of gods?
Go for it.
I have neither the relevant domains nor the realm miracle points to throw at that one.
Also, I didn't screw up on mine. Did that require any points?
That was a major divination?
Yeah.
Believe that is covered by your domain. Yeah, major divinations are level 5, so
okay.
You do not require any points there.
Sweet.
At about this point, the door out of the common room swings back open, and Dosk walks back in, followed relatively closely by a somewhat shaky-looking Vruta, who nevertheless now has the spiritual sense of a Nobilis, albeit a fledgling one, about him, and just seems brighter even in his physical form. He gives you a little bit of a wan smile and says, "Well, hello again, brothers and sister." And
welcome.
Dosk takes a seat heavily at the bar and throws back an entire low ball of something from one of those bottles.
Just because I'm a little bit of a dick sometimes. Do you have any other exes that you're going to have join the family?
By way of response, Dusk refills his glass and drains it again.
I've been there too, buddy.
And
I mean, at least you weren't giving one of your exes. Well, at least one of your exes didn't mistakenly think that you were giving them orders to save them.
True.
I should say, for my part, I look about how you'd expect someone to look if he's continuing to meet more of his god's exes.
It's true, you really are the only, unblemished follower of Dosk here.
It all seems so simple at first.
Vruta, for his part, walks back over to where the book is laying on the bar and sort of puts a hand fondly on it, and then looks back at the group of his familia Caelestis and says, "Well, I suppose that it stands to reason our next task is to isolate Celian's emanation from the rest of her being and, well, see what we can do with the vulnerable gestalt that's left over. I don't imagine it'll be easy, but from everything I've read, we should be able to take the initiative here. As Dosk has indicated to me, she's added quite a bit to her portfolio recently. She should be somewhat torporous. So, if you'll join me for a drink, perhaps we can begin planning this." And he sits heavily down in the seat, and though it is not a customarily contentious point, this session is at about the point where we usually wind them down, so unless there is anything you want to get in right under the wire, that may be where we end.
It's fine to end on not a cliffhanger every now and then.
Oh, certainly, yes. This is just neither a cliffhanger nor a particularly sort of final beat.
Mm-hmm.
It is
somewhere in between. Suddenly added a new member to the familia.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's certainly not nothing.
And there is, I dare say, a gathering storm continuing to gather in Storm.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. And hopefully Storm will be on our side in that gathering.
Fingers crossed. Especially one Storm in particular that is still shipping.
Well, in that case, that concludes this session of Dice Punks. Thanks for joining us. I hope our players and listeners enjoyed it as much as I did, and that you'll join us again next time. If you're hearing us now, you probably know where to listen to this, but we can be found almost any place one can listen to podcasts, as well as on the wider web at dicepunks.com, and on Twitter, for now, as at Dicepunks. We're also in the process of setting up a page on Co-Host, if, you can be tempted to a less problematic social media platform. But with that, I think we're ready to say farewell. So say goodbye to the kind folks at home, players.
Thanks for listening. And yeah, do check out Co-Host if that sounds like your thing. Hopefully it'll devour the heart of Twitter at some point in the near future.
It'd be great.
Thanks for listening, everyone. You don't always have to be the life of the party. Sometimes you can be the death of it.
Thanks for listening, folks. And when you do add new things to your portfolios, remember to clean up after
yourself. Excellent. And as the poet once said, I've disowned the darkness and that deadly dance. I've had enough but can't wake up. Please, one last chance. Thank you for tuning in, dear listeners, and stick around through the admin stuff for a list from Leorian. The songs in this episode, Theme of the Dice Punks and its acoustic version, were written and recorded by the Viscount of Tempo and his element, Drew. Cover art is by Joanne, who's appeared on the podcast now and again. Check out her work around the internet, where she goes by Anything Sows. Site design and graphics for DicePunks.com are by Robin, the player behind Lissa and Mavia, the Nobilis of Fury and Madness. Rain and the one-roll engine it runs on were created by Greg Stolze, whose work can be found at gregstolze.com. Nobilis was created by Jenna Caterin Moran and can be found alongside much of her other work at afarandsunlessland.wordpress.com. Links to both systems and authors can be found in the Punk Grimoire section of our website, dicepunks.com. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, that's reward enough on its own, but if you're so inclined, you can help us out by rating and reviewing us wherever you listen to us, telling your friends who you think would like us to give us a listen, and even by heading over to our Patreon at patreon.com/dicepunks. We have fun rewards available to backers, including a patron-only Discord and access to the Dice Peaks After Show for episodes 1 and following. Regardless, we hope you'll tune in again, and until then, remember, subtlety is for cowards.
This Vruta fellow, this book-bearing walking book, our newest brother in the family of nothing, has already done a great deal for us, and he's already been through a great deal, and I fear he'll be going through a good deal more before this is all over. So, I want to make things as easy for him as I can, and ease him through it, and he seems like the sort who'd want a plan. As such, I've compiled some questions that he should consider, even if he thinks he's already considered them, questions that are easier when they don't sneak up on a person. Sort of a guide for Vruta and for anyone who joins us after him, a sort of Leorian's list. 1. How do you feel about ending the divine order as it presently exists? Hopefully that appeals. If not, this could get awkward. 2. On a scale of already have to cannot conceive of doing so, how do you feel about moving on from Dosk's various mortal trespasses against you? I'll emphasize no need to go into detail at present. 3. So long as demigods exist, do you prefer to be one? This is a leading question. Who wouldn't? 4. What would you ideally like to be the demigod of? And here I'll note to also ask Dosk whether we know who has the power of preserving tomes or whatever. 5, important one, and here do feel free to be specific. How do you feel about organ meats? At this point, I pause, and I look up to see what Lissa and Romnet think of my work.